Welcome to the RegTech Association's RegTech Edge No Borders program on fraud and scams. My name is Nathan. I am the Partnerships and Member Manager here at the RTA and your host for today's event. In the spirit of reconciliation, the RegTech Association acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and the connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. In acknowledging country, we honour the resilience, wisdom and innovative spirit of Indigenous community. As you can see, we've got an action-packed agenda for you today, including 5 innovative RegTech solutions and a panel discussion diving into the state of scams and how AI is improving prevention coming up. But first, we are delighted to have Jayde Richmond, General Manager of the National Anti-Scam Centre here in Australia, to speak to us on the Scams Prevention Framework and what RegTechs need to know. Jayde is the General Manager of the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission National Anti-Scam Centre, which promotes public and private sector collaboration to make Australia a harder target for scams. Jayde is a qualified lawyer and a graduate of the Australian Institute of Company Directors. Her legal and public service career has led to improved outcomes for vulnerable Australians through compliance, education, and advocacy initiatives on consumer rights and safety. She has held roles at the Australian Communications and Media Authority, the Law Institute of Victoria, and the Office of Public Prosecutions in Victoria, and Industry Ombuds schemes. Please give a warm virtual welcome to Jayde, and I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, and hello to everybody. I'm really pleased to be here today. I'll just confirm everybody can see the slides that I've shared.
Yes, you're all good.
Give a thumbs up. Great, yep. Good to go. All right. Okay, so RegTech plays a growing role as the government pushes for stronger anti-scam measures. So it's really relevant to be here today to talk to all of you. The main part of my presentation is going to be talking about the new Scams Prevention Framework, and that is a key component of the fight against scams in Australia. So this legislation will inevitably increase the demand for RegTech solutions across different sectors to help businesses, particularly to meet the new obligations that they will have under these new laws. So in this presentation, I will provide an overview of the Scams Prevention Framework and cover the key elements that you need to know. Okay, so just briefly, the National Anti-Scam Centre was launched to help facilitate a whole of ecosystem approach to fighting scams. And that was largely based on sort of collaboration and voluntary arrangements. The ecosystem that we refer to is really referring to the complex network and environment in which scams occur. We work with organisations providing services where scam activity can occur, and that includes digital platforms, telecommunications companies, and banks in the financial sector. We see value in the NASC sitting within a whole of economy regulator and consumer protection agency in Australia, particularly where we have that reach into a lot of businesses that are the ones that are often exploited by scammers to reach consumers and take their money. This is quite a different approach to how some other anti-scam centres are set up overseas, where they often reside within a law enforcement agency. One of the benefits we feel of this sort of approach, however, is that we can be much more in that preventative space and not relying solely on the enforcement and prosecution of offenders as a way to address the broader issue. We recognise, though, that everybody has a role to play in the scams ecosystem and that everybody needs to contribute if we're going to beat this problem. This includes industry, government, law enforcement, and consumers and community organisations. So our role has been to facilitate partnerships and information sharing across government, law enforcement, industry and consumer groups to combat scams. And since our establishment in 2023, we have brought together various parts of the ecosystem to work on collaborative opportunities and expand initiatives across the ecosystem, particularly where there are weak links or where scammers are particularly effective at exploiting. We also acknowledge the immense amount of work that's been done, particularly by some sectors, and the uplifts that we're seeing. And notably, I will shout out the banking sector here in terms of a lot of initiative we've seen in the last couple of years to really put in place some effective mechanisms to reduce the harm from scams. So in Earlier this year, in February 2025, the government announced the passing of the Scams Prevention Framework. So this is legislation, world first legislation that enhances scam protections across the economy. The framework is a multifaceted approach for protecting Australian consumers from scams, and it requires service providers in selected sectors of the economy to take a variety of actions to combat scams relating to, connected with, or using their services. The framework, or the SBF, as you might hear it talked about, is a set of reforms that we're confident will lead to increased efficiency and effectiveness of scam detection and disruption right across the ecosystem. Among other things, the framework sets out clear roles and responsibilities across that ecosystem, and that includes government. The initial focus will be on 3 particular sectors, and we understand that will be banking, telecommunication providers, and digital platforms. There will be minimum consistent obligations for all regulated businesses to prevent, detect, disrupt, and respond to scams, and strong penalties to apply if businesses fail to comply with those obligations. Importantly, there'll also be an external dispute resolution scheme, and this is to promote some accountability across the scam ecosystem when victims make a complaint, to ensure consumers aren't simply bounced between organisations, and if they've been involved in a scam, particularly one that touches on the different sectors, having one external dispute resolution scheme means that they won't have to be bounced between several of them. I wanted to quickly highlight the definition of a scam because that's one thing that I think comes up a little bit from time to time, and just to give everybody a sense of what that is for the purposes of the Scam Prevention Framework. So I think as this framework comes in, there's obviously a broad understanding that we all have of what a scam is, but in the legislation itself, it defines a scam as a direct or indirect attempt to engage a scam prevention framework consumer of a regulated service where it would be reasonable to conclude that that attempt involved deception and would, if successful, cause loss or harm, including obtaining personal information or financial or other benefit from the consumer or the consumer's associates. So there's clearly some key elements there and really ties back to those regulated services. But also common elements that we see in definitions of scam and fraud, including the involvement of deception. And then importantly, it's not just financial harm, but also scammers who are looking to obtain personal information. So that's the definition for the purposes of the framework. I'll move through to the next slide now. There's still a considerable amount of work ahead to implement this framework. So including the fact that we're still waiting for the government to designate the sectors. We understand, as I said, broadly what they will be, but certainly which parts of those sectors are in or out when it comes to things like digital platforms is still to be made clear by the government, and we understand that should become more clear shortly. There's also the development of the sector code. So each of those sectors will have a code with some more definitive requirements in it to really help provide more specificity about how they can comply. And there'll also be consumer and industry guidance, of course. The National Anti-Scam Centre and others in the ACCC are currently working closely with government, fellow regulators, industry and community agencies to make sure that the elements of this framework are going to work for all stakeholders. It is the Minister who is responsible for designating the sectors, which the framework will apply to, as well as creating a number of rules, so SBF rules. And these will cover aspects of the framework like exceptions to it, the external dispute resolution schemes, and also what will be mandatory to report as actionable scam intelligence reports. The ACCC will be the overall regulator under the framework, but there will also be sector-specific regulators. So for the purposes of the Digital Platforms Code, the ACCC will be the regulator there. The Communications and Media Authority will be the sector regulator for telcos, and ASIC will be the sector regulator for the banks. In terms of the key principles in the legislation, they're framed around 6 pillars, each with a different mechanism to help protect Australians. So I'm just going to go through these in a brief way, but certainly if people are interested, they can look in the legislation and the explanatory memorandums where there's a lot more information. So governance. Regulated entities will have to develop and implement governance policies, procedures and metrics for combating scams. They'll also have to publish information about how they're protecting their customers and their customers' rights in relation to scams. In terms of prevention, this is about taking reasonable steps to prevent scams. So Treasury, with help from the National Anti-Scam Centre, are developing sector-specific codes and will map out what these will look like. And this will give a little bit more guidance around what reasonable steps means. Detection. So regulated entities will have to take reasonable steps to detect scams relating to their services, which also extends to identifying customers who have been impacted by scams. So when you think about something like a digital platform, where it may be profiles, and there might be customers who have engaged with a scam profile, these obligations will extend to identifying those customers who might have been impacted or engaged with those scam profiles. Reporting. So regulated entities will have to provide actionable scam intelligence to the ACCC, which can then be on-shared to other entities, regulated entities, that the information relates to. So entities will also have to provide information about scams to either the ACCC or other sector regulators upon request as well. So there are broad information obligations and information sharing provisions within the legislation that will enable the regulators to work well together, but also will require the mandatory reporting of that actionable scam intelligence. The details of the actionable scam intelligence will be outlined in rules. So the legislation says the manner, the form, and the kinds of information will be outlined in rules. And we understand that that's going to be worked on over the course of next year, with the government providing more information about that shortly. So actionable scam intelligence can also be shared via third parties. And I think it's important to mention that here too. Obviously within technology businesses, existing data exchanges, there will be a very good capability to be able to support businesses to comply with their obligations. And the legislation contemplates that businesses better use third parties to assist them in respect of providing that compliance with that reporting obligation. And so we'll be working further on what that looks like and what the requirements are for those sorts of third parties to be able to engage with and link up with the ACCC's information sharing and share actionable scam intelligence on behalf of entities. Disruption. So regulated businesses will have to take action to disrupt a scam or suspected scam, which also might include sharing sufficient information with their customers to enable them to take action and protect themselves. And all of this within a reasonable timeframe. And response. Entities will need to provide an accessible mechanism for consumers to report scams. So what that looks like is internal dispute resolution mechanisms, but also they'll need to be part of the Scam Prevention Framework's external dispute resolution scheme. And again, as we said before, that's to ensure consumers don't get bounced between different dispute resolution processes, and that they have a mechanism to escalate those issues to external dispute resolution. So they were kind of the key elements. And as I said earlier, there is more detail that will be worked through in the code processes, and we understand they'll be developed shortly. In terms of the current regulatory environment, we know that particularly when we look at banks, for example, in the financial sector, they're subject to quite a lot of regulation already, and that there are also users of a lot of the technology that exists in order to help and assist with complying with those. And so there's just a list there, really quite a lot of those elements that they have to comply with. One of the things I will mention is that as the National Anti-Scam Centre, we will be working closely with a range of other organisations as well, particularly to make sure there isn't duplication in reporting requirements, or that we're leveraging where information is shared somewhere that it can be shared with us. So I raise that because things like the AUSTRAC requirements and suspicious matter reporting is one area where we'll be working closely with AUSTRAC to look at what can be leveraged there in terms of information sharing and making sure it's not duplicative. Government has indicated that banks will be one of the first designated regulated sectors under the SBF, particularly due to the critical role they play in the scams ecosystem. And as I've highlighted, the banks have already made some significant inroads to developing a number of initiatives, including things like confirmation of payee and using technology to improve their scam detection and response. We've talked about the various obligations which will be enforced on banks under the SBF. The governance principles will also require senior executive certification, and reporting actionable intelligence will be mandatory. The codes will outline specific obligations to level the bar for all participants, and these codes are yet to be finalised, but will be the subject of broad industry consultation. So we certainly encourage any relevant organisations to be providing, their views on that consultation where that's possible. Breaches of the framework will result in civil penalties and may also result in other remedies being enforced, such as consumer remediation. So that's the overview of the scam prevention framework. And as I said, it does provide, I think, those broad areas, particularly in prevention, detection, and disruption, significant opportunities for technology solutions and for third parties in particular to be involved in how actionable intelligence might be reported to the ACCC. The National Anti-Scam Centre will continue in its role with supporting industry and other parts of the ecosystem to really collaborate and understand the threats and issues that are emerging, and we'll continue that work. And in particular, our focus might shift a little more to those areas which won't be subject to the framework. And so we know that there's still a lot of sectors where there are problems with scams and that might need to be designated in the future. So we'll certainly be looking closely at that, as well as continuing with our voluntary data sharing arrangements. So I might leave it there and hand back over to you, Nathan. Thank you.
Thanks, Jayde. That was fantastic. I'm just going to quickly hand straight over to Robert Harris, who's moderating our panel discussion. Robert Harris is the head of product marketing for Feedzai and a passionate proponent for fighting fraud and money laundering, particularly in financial services. He is an accomplished leader in both small and large organizations in identifying opportunities, securing funding, and creatively delivering value in line with project goals. Robert is joined by Jayde Richmond, who you just heard from, and James Roberts. James is currently the General Manager of Group Fraud Management Services at the Commonwealth Bank of Australia, overseeing the bank's strategic approach to the prevention, detection, and response to external fraud and scams. James has worked in the financial services and fraud industry for over 20 years and has extensive experience in investigating and managing fraud and financial crimes. Thank you, Robert. I will hand it over to you. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks very much, Nathan, and welcome everybody. I think it's very apt that, with the title of this session being No Edge Borders, right, we're going to take a global view now on some of the trends we're seeing in scams. Just so everybody's aware, Feedzai provides the technology to help banks stop scams. We can do that either as a complete end-to-end solution or we could augment existing platforms. Part of my role at Feedzai, though, is to look after our relationship with GASA, the Global Anti-Scam Alliance, which Feedzai is a foundation member. And then last month, we produced, in conjunction with GASA, a very comprehensive report looking at consumer attitudes to scams. It's a very important report, I think, from a couple of reasons. The first being that it's probably the largest consumer report, taking consumer attitudes across a wide range of topics, which you can see in a second, looking at the challenge that everybody faces when it comes to scams. So I think that differentiates it. There's some fantastic other reports on a national basis that delves down into it. And I think you have to obviously take this with a few caveats. I think when you do a global report like this, I think Jayde highlighted that very well, is that different countries define a scam in itself in different ways. So in some countries, it's purely when a payment is involved. But I'm interested to see the approach that's being taken in Australia and also similarly in the US, I believe, where, a scam goes much broader. It's also the acquisition of confidential information. So, we have to bear those in mind. When you do something like this globally, there's going to be people coming at this with different just move through. So the idea over the next 20 to 25 minutes, quickly run through some of the findings. We can only touch on some of the findings, but it's interesting to see in Jayde's presentation how some of the challenges that we're observing on a global basis is already being addressed in the Australia codes and actions. Jayde, there was one question though that I was also thinking about that came through. I don't know if you want to take it now before we even start, but it's like, what sort of timescales are you talking about with the framework coming in?
Look, I wish I could answer that with some certainty. I think we will soon have the really clear sort of pathway forward in terms of Australia's timeline. What I will say is that it's likely that we'll have some staggering of those various parts of the framework. So it is a particularly complex framework in that it has those multiple levels of the legislative approach, the codes, the multi-regulators, the different sectors, and then the EDR schemes, as well as rules that need to be created. So, so there is a fair bit to do, but look, we're hopeful that the government will be working to get those consultation processes through as quickly as possible so that we all have some clarity. So unfortunately, I can't give you the specific timeframes right now, not being from the government itself, but I am hopeful that that information and those consultation processes will kick off soon.
Okay. Thanks very much, Jayde. Nathan, maybe you can move on to the next slide then, and let's dig into the report. I'll just give a quick highlight. So as I said, this is a very comprehensive report. So you can see 46,000 consumers are requested for response across 42 markets. You can see that spread, typically 1,000, but in some countries a bit less and sometimes a bit more, to really try and give that global perspective, as we know we're facing a global challenge here. So that's the background. If we can go on to the next slide, please, Nathan. So as I say, the research has findings, and in the report, which you can download after this webinar, contains over 50 or 60 different findings covered by across the scam prevalence, what's the experience of consumers, scam reporting, again, that Jayde mentioned, and the challenges that the industry faces there, as well as, what is the impact on what people are doing. So it's really comprehensive, covering a number of different angles of that consumer experience. But that consumer experience obviously has a lot of impact on what the industry players and the different sectors are doing to address that. So let's just quickly go through a few of the findings. We're going to touch on some, and then Jayde, and it'd be great to get your view as well, right? As we go through. Next slide, please. Yeah, so here we go. So some of the findings, I've just highlighted a couple here from this report. So 57% of adults globally have had a scam experience, but 23% of those are falling victim to the scam, actually having a loss, be it emotional or financial. So that's on average across the globe. I wondered if got any views from the panel here about if that's what you're seeing. Is that what you'd expect? Any thoughts on that? Those two numbers there. So 57% have experience and 23% are actually losing. Jayde, maybe I can turn to you first.
Yeah, happy to comment on those. Look, I think in regard to the number of people experiencing scams, I think I would expect this to be quite a high figure in most countries. We do know that people, the extent to which, in Australia in particular, people are receiving scam messages, whether that's via email, by SMS, phone calls, on platforms, fake websites, the whole extensive ways now that scammers can try to reach people. I think it's not surprising that that figure is 57%. I think in terms of people losing money to scams, again, I'm cautious here noting the different definitions in different countries and different jurisdictions. And so we all have to keep in mind that when consumers respond to these, they may also have their own kind of definition or understanding of what a scam is. So I'm always a little bit cautious here. I think what we're seeing in our Scam Watch reports in Australia is some shifts in some trends. Similar to what I think is listed there, we have seen quite an increase in lower amounts of loss, but more frequently in relation to sort of shopping scam and buying and selling scams. We have seen some decreases, though, in some of those areas that are traditionally more extensive losses, such as investment scams, and certainly a lot of work that's been done by a range of stakeholders to try to bring those losses down has had some impact. We're seeing phishing scams on the rise, however, and I think the use of AI and making those look more real means we're seeing more people actually lose money to them than we ever saw in the past before. So I think it's really different depending on the scam type. And also I think people's experience of losing money to a scam will to some extent depend on what they define that as. There are some places where people might even think that, having a sort of credit card fraud or something, they might define themselves as a scam. So I think that, when you're surveying a really large group, it's important to think about those definitional issues. But that being said, we do know that scams are really prevalent in most communities, and that, there's a lot of work to be done, hence why we're all here talking about it. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. James, anything to add there?
Yeah, maybe just a local lens on that, looking at CBA side. While I'm obviously not going to go into the specific figures, if I was to take the total number of CBA customers that have reported a scam in 12-month periods of FY25 in my head versus the number of, say, digitally active customers in Combank, it's yeah, it's miles below the figure that's quoted there. So I think, and I mean, it's feedback I've shared with Global Anti-Scams Alliance in the past of the devil's in the detail and the sampling methodology. I remember previously there was a sampling methodology that guys used where it was younger people that were rewarded with gaming credits from memory to respond to the survey. So things like that can cause a skew. And I think the other element is that Jayde's talking about is definitely there'd be some people that say a fraud is a scam, the scam is a fraud and stuff like that. But it's that wouldn't correlate to what I know any of the majors are experiencing here in Australia by, like, it'd be fractions of a percent comparatively.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think, James, just to answer your point, the methodology was changed this year, actually based on feedback similar to what you just described. Yeah, but of course we're obviously targeting an audience here that have got something to say, something to voice out. So disproportionately, maybe the numbers are higher. But I think it's the comparisons that you can see, like people who've experienced the scam. And when we come on to some of the other numbers as well, you'll see that there's still some interesting, I think, dimensions that can be extracted. So if we go on to the next slide.
I think that's fair, Robert. And sorry, I didn't define my comments properly. The 57% one, in terms of the attempt at you being exposed to scam content, I would have been unsurprised if it was 80 or 90%, to be honest, because the volume of stuff impacting you didn't necessarily fall for it, but impacting you. I think most consumers would be exposed to it, but the correlation to people that actually experience some form of loss from it is very different from the number of ones that have experienced an attempt against them.
Yeah, getting up to 50%, is maybe disproportionate.
Yeah, I would have gone higher. I wouldn't have been surprised if it was 90 or even 100%.
Yeah. Okay, I mean that. But then just briefly, because we've got quite a few slides to go through, so just quickly, this is looking at then the different dimensions. So now we're looking across this population that has answered, and we can see that, and maybe surprising, I don't know, but there are different groups impacted. So to come back to your point, Jayde, about some of the trends now moving towards higher volume, lower value, like purchase scams. It's interesting that those tend to be more, applicable to some of the younger generation, without wanting to stereotype things too much. Whereas maybe some of the higher value, impersonation scams, romance scams, maybe apply to a different profile. So there are definitely some surprising numbers in that. So overall 23%, but some groups obviously experiencing it. But I think when we see this from our perspective and working with our customers, to James's point, I think you have to look much more into the detail, and you see that different types of scams have a different impact and a different prevalence depending on the group you're in. I don't know if you've, James, if that's anything that you've seen in terms of the sort of demographic of the people that fall for either scams overall or different types of scam.
Yeah, and some of it probably bounces back into an area that Jayde's very familiar with. So in an Aussie context, highest losses tend to be experienced at the elder Australian segment, possibly also as a result of essentially more disposable income / accrued wealth over that time. But to your point earlier, Robert, at the lower end of that age curve, buying and selling scams, SMS phishing, there's a lot of volume in there affecting that group. So I think kind of every cohort is vulnerable in some way or another. It just it often depends on the modus operandi specifically.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Let's move on to the next slide, please. So this is where I really wanted to get your thoughts, because for me, this is one of the most revealing things, and maybe it comes back to some of those numbers that we're seeing proportionately high, is looking at the level of confidence people have in their ability to recognize scams. So don't forget, these are people that have somehow also responded quite high, that they've actually lost money to scams, and yet look at their confidence level. So 73%, there's a range depending on the region. Oceania look very high, 85%. And if you actually just look at the numbers that were not confident, it's down to sort of 13% of people not being confident in spotting a scam. So again, quite high in that level of confidence, and that contrasts, I think, with the number of people who are falling victim. I don't know, Jayde, would you see that consumers have a false level of confidence, or is it something that just catches them when they're unawares at that susceptible moment? How would you contextualize
Look,
that?
I think people do tend to have a bit of an optimism bias. Certainly the research we've done at the National Anti-Scam Centre highlights that there is an optimism bias where people do feel that they may not be caught out by a scam, or that they've got the ability to recognise one. I think we understand that people, even if they've been scammed, may still continue to feel that they can identify a scam. I think part of our messaging and what we sort of encourage others to talk about a lot when they're trying to sort of raise awareness about scams is that there is a scam for everyone, and that we all need to consider our particular circumstances and where we might be vulnerable. And I shared a story this morning with a group about having thought about that myself personally recently, having not done so, and thought, I feel like I'm not likely to I'm not a particularly trusting person, given I work in this space. So that means that, I'm less likely to fall for authority ringing me up on the phone and threatening me. I'm not going to think that's going to happen. And I'm pretty confident I won't fall for that. But I am somebody who's really busy. I can rush. I can read things quickly. And so I'm probably more likely to be caught out by an email phishing scam or a phone SMS scam. And so I then am very, very careful, including by never really believing the SMSs that I receive, and regularly maybe failing to take action when I probably should on some of them because they're real. So I think people understanding their own, that they will all have a vulnerability at a particular point in time. It could be when a family member dies, or when we're particularly emotional, or when we have, when we're rushing, we've got lots happening in our lives. So, for us, the main point here is that we do need to, perhaps, what this indicates to me is that more work needs to be done to help people understand that they are at risk, that we all are. Doing that in a way that doesn't necessarily scare people from using technology or engaging with it. But I think that it is a worry that people may feel overconfident in regard to their ability to detect scams, because I think that might be something that's contributing to people being more likely to then be scammed. So, yeah, I think the research we've done certainly supports that there is that optimism bias. But also, when you look at the data and you analyze people who have experienced a scam or lost money to a scam, it covers all cohorts. It doesn't matter background, education level, age, or anything. It can happen to anyone. So, there's a lot more work to be done here, I think, with the community, particularly in the age of AI as well. So the ability for authentic impersonation is far higher now than it was even, 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, I love that, Jayde. It's almost an oxymoron that people can score themselves so highly when it is fairly easily possible to create a deep fake of someone which is indistinguishable from their actual being. At the minute, I mean, it wasn't a great deep fake, but earlier today I saw the Prime Minister was impersonated on one of the social media platforms. The voice was off, it was an American accent, but the mouth movement synchronization was very good. I couldn't spot it from the mouth movement. It was the accent. It was the accent, and the rest of the story was the problem. But if I'm 23 years in, managing fraud departments and scams and this, that, and the other, crime in general, if I can't spot it from a thing, I'd suggest that most of the public can't spot it either, which means that, to your point, Jayde, there's definitely an overconfidence bias that we've somehow got to crack from a behavioral science perspective.
Yeah, I agree. And I think as people sort of have a historical view maybe of what a scam used to be like, with the African prince as the classic example, right? As technology advances and AI is used for deep fakes, etc. Yeah, maybe, it is harder to spot, and people still think back to the old days. Maybe there is that hangover. Okay, can we go to the next slide, please, Nathan? Just a couple more to talk through. And again, picking up on that false sense of confidence, and maybe this is sort of self-reinforcing, I think, if we look at for me, what was a very surprising number. Okay, so based on that, people are confident being able to spot a scam, so they think they've spotted it. So 93% actually take a step to see whether it's legitimate or not. And I obviously won't break down into all the detail, but what this shows is that some people are taking steps that are proven to be effective, i.e. they do recognize it's a scam and it does break the chain. But other ones are taking approaches like, for example, checking for reviews on the same website, which is proving to be very ineffective in actually breaking that chain and stopping the scam in its tracks. So we can see here there's lots of measures being taken, but I guess again, some are correct and some are not. I wondered again here, what can be done by the industry, do you think, and by which parts of the industry to make sure people use those effective measures rather than the ineffective ones? James, have you got any thoughts?
Sorry, transparently, I was multitasking reading the comments, and there was a great comment from Aaron Chipper on there about the Kruger-Dunning effect, essentially where the people with the highest perception of highest competence ability are actually often the lowest competence ability. I had a lovely piece of verbatim feedback from a consumer which stated, I don't need additional protections because I won't fall for a scam. And my first reaction was immediately, I probably need to watch your accounts, type thing. But yeah, I think aside from deep fakes and the distinguishing of the visual and realization that you can no longer distinguish it, I think it's about zoning the people in on what are the reliable methods. And I think our behavioral science team, a chap called Will Mailer runs it. They've been doing a lot of work on trying to get, and Jayde made a comment on it earlier, trying to get people to go from fast thinking to slow thinking. Because the reality is life is really busy. There's parcels coming in, there's emails, there's messages, and everyone's trying to stay afloat amongst increasing information being thrown at you. It's almost like, how do you train people to know when to pause, go from fast thinking mode into slow thinking, and when they're in the paused state, to use highly effective as opposed to, hey, it's got great reviews on the same hosted website that were paid reviews or something like that on it. So I think that's the challenge ahead of us. So.
Yeah. Jay, would you agree that there's a challenge here?
Absolutely. I think so. And I think one of the reasons we use sort of stop, check, protect now as our main key messaging, as opposed to lots and lots of specific messaging around sort of all different types of scams and what you can do to protect yourself, is because the research has shown that one of the key and primary things that can lead to an effective identification of a scam is when people slow down, pause and stop. And undertake activities that might trigger that rational thinking. We know that scammers are going to use things like urgency, motivating people through needing deep senses of connection, a whole lot of social engineering techniques that they use, most of which are aimed to get you to act quickly. And so we need to reverse that. And that's why I gave my example that, when I thought about it, I am probably at risk of rushing all the time. And I have to then be very, very careful. So, for me, it's a risk approach. It's, yes, I might miss out on this great deal here, but I'd rather miss out on that than lose, a couple of $1,000s in buying something really quickly because I've, been convinced that the sale is going to end quickly. So I do think there's some education of the community around slowing down and stopping, and understanding that scammers are actually purposely trying to get you not to do that. That is the whole methodology behind a lot of the scams. And you see that in the way they frame things. There's an urgency, whether it's a bank impersonation scam saying your accounts have been hacked, you need to act quickly, whether it's a threat scam saying, we're going to cancel your visa if you don't do X. These are all aimed to get an emotive, not logical reaction from people. And I think with it, this doesn't surprise me. I think people still think scams are fairly easy to identify a lot of the time. And so when you see things like 27% of people checking for spelling and grammar, we know that's not going to work, particularly in an age of AI. I'm finding it takes longer for the teams that I have to identify whether something's a scam communication or not when we see things come in. So there are sometimes not easy ways, but when people stop, I think they think, and the thing that they're thinking about is this real, or could this be a scam? They are just less likely to then go forward because they're going to weigh up those risks and benefits, and often it is not worth the risk to go forward and buy that pair of shoes that you want if it's going to be a risk that you're going to lose that money. For some people it might. I mean, there's situations where you might think, well, okay, it's $50 if I lose that, that's fine. But we do know that, scammers are also collecting other information like the way you paid on credit card or other information from you. So we'd encourage people not to proceed. And I think one of the other things we've seen in the research, which you've highlighted there, is the sort of high effectiveness of asking friends and family. Just stopping and talking to people about it can really help break a scam early. I wish more people were doing that when it comes to things like romance scams or investment scams. We know that when people are really entrenched in communications with scammers, it becomes incredibly difficult to break that, even with a lot of good and well-intentioned advice from family members or from banks and others. So talking to friends and family at the start can really help as well. People avoid scams. I also think there is, the role of technology here in the types of services that organisations provide. So, again, you look at banking and some of the new initiatives I've certainly seen in my banking that I'm getting lots and lots of really helpful things to help me avoid scams that come through, and increased verification checks, confirmations of payee, all those sorts of things can really help as well. And so looking across the ecosystem and thinking about ways that don't necessarily create so much friction that it's a disincentive to use services, but being able to kind of think carefully about what tools can we give consumers so they can actually undertake some checks to ensure they're not in a scam. Sometimes even the process of doing those things will help them trigger that logical brain that'll then mean they can make that decision for themselves too.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, quite paradoxically, probably finding a spelling mistake probably means it's more genuine nowadays than a scam. So it's quite interesting how things have changed. So let's skip on. Nathan, I'm conscious of the time. So just quick, I'll summarize this. I think, Jay, what you've talked about in terms of addressing the reporting issue, is an excellent example of what needs to be done. Globally, there's a big problem about people either not knowing where to report or just thinking it's a waste of time. And that's pretty consistent across the globe. So reporting does remain a big issue, even in those countries that have a sort of notified reporting mechanism. People still unsure or they think it's not worthwhile. So that's a concern, I guess, but maybe that's being addressed, as you say. And just to come on to the final slide, I think there's one more, or I just thought, so yeah, okay, so we talk about different types of payments. I think there's a lot more detail, again, in the report. I encourage you to have a look, but again, this just shows the great diversity of different payment options, including crypto now as a rising mechanism. So less than 1% of payments are on crypto, but over 11% of scam payments go on that rail. And again, there are differences across the different regions. But just to wrap up, because I'm conscious of the time, planning now is underway for the next report. I wondered if you had any thoughts about maybe AI, and maybe there's some other angles that should be being pursued in terms of new types of questions or new things to ask the consumer. Any suggestion, just like in the last minute, maybe just one from each of you about how this report can be improved next year?
I think I'd just comment maybe on methodology. I think I would, being really careful with the methodologies. I think sometimes looking a bit more at medians in losses than averages. I think there's some calculations and things in these reports that could help it line up a bit more with how other reporting is done. But I think I acknowledge it's really hard when different countries have a lot of different things of their own reporting, and then you have this sort of overlay over the top. But I just think carefully about the methodologies, because I think these can be, a global report is really unique and really helpful, but I think there's probably a bit more work to be done to help the results be a little bit more reliable for us to use. I think that would be my main comment.
Thanks, Jayde. James, any last
Yeah,
thoughts?
just echo Jayde's comments on it. Like, damn lies and statistics. You got to zone in on the methodologies and the representative samples to make sure it carries across, but also the definitional elements on that the respondent knows that they're talking about this, not this, or both together, because otherwise it will skew the data. That all being said, though, I like some of the customer insights in there. I think there's take-homes for us as organizations collectively as to how we need to engage with our customers to give them the right skills and maybe personal tools to help them identify that something's bad. Spruik a CBA thing, but it's actually, there's other entities that don't. We've got an entity called TrueU that's offering a free app that you can basically insert images of dodgy text messages into, and it gives you an opinion back on whether or not that's dodgy. I've seen companies like Scamnetic do that. So maybe one of the future states is there's trying to train the customers, but then what kit can you physically give them to proactively help them up front? Like in the old days, it was virus protection, and yeah, sure, that's still around type thing. What's the virus protection equivalent that can be given to customers to help them better delineate between good and bad?
Yeah. Providing the right tools. I think there's obviously a key role to play for AI in terms of identifying those patterns. So different types of scams. We know that we address different types of scams in different ways based on the feedback and the experience. So thanks very much. I say this has just been a snippet and a highlight from the report. There's a lot more that covers even sort of the emotional impact and the feelings as the customers experience when they go through this journey. So you're welcome to download the report. It's been out a month. And as I say, any suggestions for the next year's one will be, gratefully received. So thanks very much. Nathan, should I hand back to you?
Yes. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Jayde and James. We really appreciate the time that you have taken to join us today. Now, stick with us. We're going to move straight into our RegTech presentations, and this is where the rubber meets the road. This is how we start to begin to solve the challenge of fraud and scams. We've got 5 presentations for you that showcase the diverse range of solutions. Just a reminder to our presenters that you have 5 minutes, and at the 4-minute 30-second mark, I'll turn my camera on to let you know that it's time to wrap up. First up, we have Daniel from Jayde Third Eye. Over to you.
Thanks, Nathan. Hi, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to present today. I'm here to talk to you about how Jayde Third Eye helps organisations like yours stay ahead of increasingly sophisticated financial crime, fraudsters, and scams. Next slide. This is a little bit about our story. We're a financial crime solution that started back in 2012 out of New Zealand, with offices now in Australia and the UK. We support over 160 plus reporting entities globally. We monitor over 277 million transactions and screen over 11 million customers a year. We also have an automated integration with AUSTRAC and the FIU to streamline and fast track all of the key regulatory reporting requirements. Financial crime doesn't respect borders, and neither does our solution. Our global reach combined with our local expertise and 24/7 support means we're here when you need us. Next slide. We're honoured to work with some of the most respected names in financial services. Here is a small sample of the organisations that trust us to protect their customers and their reputation. Next slide. Now let's talk about how we can actually help you fight financial crime. Fraudsters are getting smarter, using social engineering, synthetic identities, and sophisticated techniques. You need an integrated approach. We have a flexible real-time transaction monitoring with an extensive rules library, which helps you act before risk becomes reality, detecting patterns that indicate scams like authorised push payment fraud, romance scams, and money mule activity. We also have real-time customer screening to help you screen customers at onboarding and through ongoing monitoring against both the Dow Jones and LSEG WorldCheck watch list, giving you the confidence to identify risks before they become problems. As mentioned earlier, we have automated regulatory reporting to assist with submissions of TTRs, SMRs, IFTIs to AUSTRAC, and PTRs and SARs to the New Zealand FIU. We have a case management solution to investigate suspicious behaviour systematically, documenting everything you need to help make informed decisions. These solutions can run standalone or integrated to create a simple workflow that suits organisations of any size. Next slide. So we empower customers across multiple sectors because fraud targets every industry: banking, non-bank lending, alternative finance, casinos and gaming, payment providers, wealth management, firms, just to name a few. We're also able to assist with all the new Tranche 2 entities coming on board next year. Whatever your sector, we understand your specific AML and fraud challenges and regulatory requirements. Next slide. Behind every fraud statistic is a real person, a retiree who's lost their life savings, a business owner whose accounts have been drained, a young professional who unknowingly became a money mule. We give you the tools to protect your customers from financial crime. When you detect suspicious activity early, you're saving people from devastating financial and emotional harm. Next slide. So what makes us different? We believe in doing what's right, not just checkbox compliance, but genuinely stopping financial crime. We take time to understand our customers, customizing solutions because a wealth manager or wealth management provider has different needs to a bank. We give you more time for what matters. Our automation frees your team to focus on high-risk cases that require human judgment. For Third Eye, this is a partnership. We're in the fight with you to make sure financial crime doesn't pay. Next slide. Fraudsters are already using AI deepfakes, exploiting cryptocurrency and targeting victims through social media. They'll never stop evolving. But here's the good news. When you combine sophisticated technology with human expertise and genuine partnership, you'll create something powerful. At Third Eye, we're committed to staying ahead. Whether you're dealing with authorised push payment fraud, money mule networks, or the next scam we haven't even seen, we'll be ready. And when you partner with Third Eye, you'll be ready too. So please reach out if you'd like to see how we can strengthen your fight against financial crime. And thank you for the important work you do to protect customers and the financial system. Together, we're making a difference. Thank you.
Thanks, Daniel. Next up, we have Philip from FNA. Over to you.
Thanks, Nathan. Hi, everybody. I'm Philip Straley. I'm FNA's president. For those of you who are not familiar with FNA, we're a London-based AI-driven analytics tech company focused principally on payments. Today, I'm going to talk about FNA's fraud portal. Next slide, Nathan. So as it relates to fraud and scams, we come from the same point of view as our speaker running the Australian Anti-Scam Centre, in that this needs to be an all-society approach, or as was termed earlier, an all-ecosystem approach. We believe this needs to be taken a step further and be a tech-enabled all-ecosystem approach, and which is the reason why at FNA we don't work directly with individual financial institutions, though individual financial institutions are our principal users of our software, but we enable national level anti-scam utilities around the world in order to both prevent fraud at the outset, and scams in particular at the outset, and to claw back money to victims when they have been scammed. Our portal is also used beyond the financial institutions themselves. So central banks and supervisors, consumer protection authorities, law enforcement agencies at a national level, and financial intelligence units. Next slide. Here's a quick snapshot of the FNA fraud portal. I don't have time to go into this in a lot of detail, but we have a number of interrelated applications built on the portal. From left to right, you see we have a case portal or a case management application for management of scam reporting, so reporting of incidents, for the validation of those at a national level, through to communication between individual financial institutions and financial institutions and national law enforcement. We have an application that we call Money Trails that is for real-time track and trace of funds. Once there has been a scam, our system can track and trace that as it is onward muled through different payments channels to freeze or earmark funds in those accounts and to claw back money to victims. We have scoring applications. We have an intelligence hub for enhanced data and information sharing between financial institutions and a number of others. But maybe if you could go to the next slide, Nathan, I can just give a practical example. So we've been deployed in the country of Malaysia, in Southeast Asia. So I'm in Singapore, just next door right now. Malaysia took the step about 3 years ago to set up what is called the National Scam Response Center, very similar to the Australia Anti-Scam Center that was here with us earlier today. It sits within the central bank. PayNet Malaysia is the national payment system operator that runs pretty much all the payment rails in Australia. So the equivalent of AP Plus and AusPayNet, et cetera, probably put together plus a bit. So it's a very centralized system. They run and operate the infrastructure for the National Scam Response Center in Malaysia. And we are the principal technology provider for that. And if we look at a few statistics, there are now close to 1,000 users on a daily basis of this system. So the National Scam Response Center's scam utility, fund freezing rates prior to the technology being put in place when there's a scam, fund freezing rates were about 0.5% of scammed funds. Now they're between 25 and 30%, so 50 to 60x increase. And we, together with the Malaysian authorities, have been able to reduce by about 75% the compliance effort for investigation, both in the individual financial institutions, so banks and e-wallets, et cetera, and in national law enforcement. So very, very practical impacts that we've seen in Malaysia. Next slide. In Malaysia, the specific part of our technology that has been deployed is called Money Trails. Money Trails is now deployed for real-time track and trace across 22 different data sources, so QR payments, faster payments, ATM switch, and a number of others, in order to freeze funds, also to identify mule accounts, and also to enhance predictive modeling. So effectively a virtuous feedback loop where known mules and likely mule accounts are effectively fed back into machine learning models to improve those models for prevention. And then finally, just to close off, I think a very important part of the fight going forward will be not only at a national level, but internationally. So cross-border. Very oftentimes, the second or third or fourth muling transaction will go cross-border because criminals know that cross-border defenses are weaker than defenses within an individual country. There are a number of different ways that cross-border could be handled. A key way that we are doing this is through linking of national level track and trace systems cross-border. So when money is muled cross-border, it could be followed cross-border by financial institutions and national level law enforcement. I'll stop there. Thank you, Nathan, and everybody, and happy to connect.
Thanks, Philip. Next up, we have Michelle from Fivecast.
Thanks, Nathan. Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Weatherhead, and I'm representing Fivecast. Fivecast is a social media intelligence an OSINT technology provider. So I'm going to share with you some real world use cases and how we can solve some of the challenges around open source intelligence. So if we go to the next slide, Nathan. So a little bit about Fivecast. We're an Australian technology company. We were founded back in 2017 and we have over 100 customers around the world. We are, as I said, a leading provider in OSINT technology and social media intelligence. We have a wide array of customers using our solutions, from government agencies to police, law enforcement, corporate enterprises, and financial services organizations. And they're using our technology for a wide array of use cases, from wildlife trafficking investigations right through to executive protection. If we go to the next slide. So a little bit about social media. We're all aware that social media is talked about quite a lot as a vector that's used by the scammers to make contact with victims, to groom them, social engineer, and so on. And we're also aware that it's a very, very complex and rich data environment, and we should be using that for our financial crime investigations and intelligence from a proactive insights, but also from a how can we protect our customers. So I want to share with you a little bit about how Fivecast technology can help you with some of that. So next slide. If we're looking at using some of the social media data, there's quite a few challenges around that. So if we were to go out there as an investigation analyst, there's a few things that we need to overcome. First of all, as we're all aware, social media is vast breadth of platforms. I've probably got about 7 platforms that I'm signed up for, and with some of those platforms I've got over 10 years worth of data associated with it. But not only with the breadth and the depth, but there's also a lot of data variety that we've got to deal with as well. There's reels, there's likes, there's emojis, there's text. There's all sorts of things that we need to cope with from an analytics perspective. I think the other thing that we need to be aware of if we're using this data for our investigations is, particularly if we're using our own credentials, is potential to tip off. And the lack of audit trail and explainability around what we're doing. You need to have a systematic approach to doing these investigations. And I think the other thing to bear in mind from a financial crime operations perspective is, how do you incorporate this process, this technology, and these insights into your financial crime ecosystem? Next slide. So Fivecast Onyx can help you with some of these challenges that I've talked about, and I'm going to share with some real world use cases here. So this is a live potential scambling group that we've been investigating on a social media site, and I want to share with you how we can help you get to the information really quickly. So within this, we've been able to collect data against this open group, and we've been able to run analytics on top of it to help you identify insights. So if we go to the next slide, I'll show you some examples here. So here we've got a couple of examples of our AI. So the first one here, we've got our AI that we've overlaid on top of this group to identify those posts that look like potential gambling or potential scambling. And because we've got a rich interface, we're able to show you the model insights and the explainability around that. Another key AI aspect that we've got is the ability to, once you've collected this vast data, to be able to network graph it. And what we can see in this screenshot here is the ability to see all those members associated with this gambling site, and the red indicators within that gambling site show us those people that are heavily involved and potentially influencing. And this is really important if we're trying to ascertain who's going out there, who's targeting our customers, and putting prevention measures in place. And our next slide, Nathan, I've got another example of a social media group, and this one is a renter bank, and it's crazy to see how open and brazen some of these people are on some of these social media sites, where they're trading bank details for a certain fee, and it's all out there in the open. So again, we've collected the data and we're able to see who are those high influencers, who's interacting the most, and so on. And the next slide, I'll show you again, some of the analytics that you can apply on this and why it might be important for you. So here you can apply analytics to sort of say, hey, are any of these communications, any of these connections associated with my organization? And this will then help you put prevention measures in place. It'll help you understand from a future proofing, what are some of the MOs that are going on and what's being communicated around it. So these are just some of the things that I wanted to show you around OSINT technology and Fivecast Onyx, how it can help you make sense of that wide array of complex data to get to the information that you need to. And the final thing I want to leave you with is, if you have a tool like Fivecast Onyx, it enables you to operationalize this technology. You can incorporate it into your ecosystem from a wide array of use cases and within your technology ecosystem as well. More information on this slide here if you want to reach out. Thanks.
Thanks, Michelle. I understand it's a pretty tight timeline, but you did well. Next up, we have Nikhil from Frankie One.
Thanks, Nathan. Hi, everyone. My name is Nikhil. I'm the Senior Product Manager for Fraud and Transaction Monitoring here at Frankie One. So a lot of you would know that Australia's AML-CTF reforms will start to take effect from the 31st of March 2026 next year for reporting entities. And they represent the biggest shift in compliance requirements we've seen in years. One of the key changes is around the safe harbor requirements and how they will no longer apply to the same extent that they do today. And then there's a fundamental move to a risk-based approach for onboarding and ongoing monitoring. At the same time, as you've already heard, identity fraud and scams continue to grow across industries and products. At the same time, customers still expect a streamlined onboarding experience. So how do you meet stricter compliance requirements, combat fraud, and provide seamless customer experiences all at once? That's exactly the problem Frankie One solves. Next slide, please. Traditionally, most organizations have to manage multiple vendor integrations, one for KYC, another for biometrics, a third for fraud signals, maybe a fourth for sanction screening. The result, complex orchestration, change management costs at every time you want to switch providers, and worst of all, a fragmented, disconnected view of your customers scattered across different systems. Frankie One changes the game entirely. With our platform, you get one single integration that provides access to hundreds of global identity, fraud, and compliance providers and data sources. If you want to switch from one biometrics vendor to another, it's a configuration change. No new integration required, no 6 months of having to do work to integrate a new vendor in. Most importantly, you get a single unified view of every customer across all these tools. One platform, one portal, one source of truth. Next slide, please. Frankie One enables true end-to-end risk management across the entire customer lifecycle. Think about it in 3 critical stages. Onboarding, fraud prevention, and compliance screening identifies high-risk customers and stops bad actors from using false, stolen, or synthetic identities to create accounts. Activity monitoring protects existing customer accounts from takeover attempts at high-risk moments. Payment screening and transaction monitoring detects high-risk transactions in real time to prevent fraud, losses, and stop scams before they succeed, and identify money laundering and terrorism financing patterns. All of this on one platform, with data flowing seamlessly between the stages. Your risk signals from onboarding inform your monitoring activities. Your AML screening updates risk scores dynamically. Everything just works together. Next slide, please. So here's an overview of what this looks like in practice. For individual onboarding, we offer the full spectrum: KYC verification against global databases, PEPs and sanction screening, adverse media monitoring, identity document verification, including optical character recognition, facial biometrics with liveness detection, plus fraud signals across phone numbers, email addresses, and devices, including behavioral biometrics. For organizational customers, we provide Know Your Business verification, including UBO identification. On top of that, we've built a trust analyzer for trust and complex structures. And we also provide sanctions and adverse media screening for organizations. For ongoing monitoring, everything continues throughout the lifecycle, with the addition of comprehensive fraud and AML transaction monitoring. Our customer risk engine ties it all together, working across every single solution, presenting you with one unified and dynamic view of your customer risk that evolves in real time. Next slide, please. This is where Frankie One's risk-based approach really shines, and it's perfectly aligned with the new requirements coming in 2026. Our platform assigns every single user a real-time risk score the moment they start onboarding. Risk scores continue to recalculate as new data comes in. Low-risk customers sell through with minimal friction. High-risk users are automatically escalated to additional verification steps like document validation and facial biometrics. The result, you block fraud early without creating friction for your legitimate customers. This means faster onboarding for genuine customers and stronger protection against bad actors. That's the power of intelligence, real-time and risk-based decisioning. Next slide, please. Our risk engine does not stop at onboarding. It continues to work across the entire customer relationship. We leverage device intelligence to spot suspicious patterns, behavioral biometrics to detect anomalies, contact validation to identify risky email and phone signals, and comprehensive ongoing AML screening. These signals trigger targeted checks automatically, surfacing fraud and financial crime risks at every stage, whether it's a suspicious login, an unusual transaction, or a customer who suddenly appears on a sanctions list. Our engine catches it and alerts you immediately, all helping you to stay within your risk appetite. Next slide, please. We provide unified access to all your customer data, whether you're working in our purpose-built portal, consuming data through our API, or pushing insights into your own dashboards. You get real-time access to identity data, risk assessments, and verification results all in one place. No more jumping between systems or reconciling conflicting data sources. Everything you need to make fast and confident decisions is right there. This is how modern risk and compliance teams should operate. Next slide, please. So we work with three of the big four banks in Australia, plus major global customers across several industries, including e-commerce, crypto, lending, and gaming. Our platform operates in over 190 countries, providing truly global coverage. Security is non-negotiable for us. We're ISO 27001 certified and SOC 2 Type 2 compliant with end-to-end encryption and enterprise-grade security architecture. When you choose Frankie One, you're choosing a proven and trusted platform. Thank you. If you have any questions, reach out to us at hello@frankieone.com or feel free to contact me directly to find out more. Thank you.
Thanks, Nikhil. And finally, last but certainly not least, we have Bambang from Ingenuous. Over to you.
Oh, thank you, Nathan. Thank you, RegTech Association, for giving us this opportunity to present today. And yeah, thank you for everyone for joining here. I'm the last presenter, so hopefully it won't take longer. Yeah, my name is Bambang, and I'm one of the director at Ingenuous. So my presentation today focuses on how we're transforming a landscape filled with fragmented fraud tools into a unified platform, like our solution Intuitions, that effectively combat financial crime, including fraud and scam. Next slide, please, Nathan. Just a bit of background of who we are. Ingenuous is a Melbourne-based decision support company delivering its financial crime prevention solutions to a broad range of industries globally. Our headquarters is based here in Melbourne, and we do have projects and operational teams distributed globally, including Indonesia, Malaysia, South Korea, Sri Lanka, all the way to UAE, Barcelona, and Mexico. Next slide, please, Nathan. Our solution is quite flexible. We can be deployed in on-prem or on SaaS. That's why we do support clients across many sectors, including superannuations, mutual bank, buy now, pay later, money transfer, banking, leasing, bullion trading, digital banks, insurance, and all the way to government. So this diversity allows us to bring that deep cross-industry experience into our work, creating value for both of our team and most importantly, to our clients. Next one, Nathan. We recognize that global regulations can sometimes challenging and increasingly demanding for its financial service provider. The expectation now extends beyond just monitoring and reporting fraud and AML. Organizations must also address a wider range of financial crimes, including those linked to human and environmental crimes. Next, please. Now, the challenge is that many large organizations who implemented computerized systems years ago, those systems were designed to handle just one single function for one single product or service. Now, over time, this has created information silos across organizations. Next one, please, Nathan. So that's why at Ingenuous, we developed our product Intuitions, a single real-time platform that can ingest information and data from any number of sources or silos, delivering to the user a complete customer view, whether the customer is being onboarded or transacting, All that info will be available in the same system, which is Intuition. Next one, Nathan. Now, many organizations continue to manage fraud and AML as a separate functions. It's true that it is a different system for each financial crime use case. While the objective of fraud prevention and AML is different, they both actually need the data from the same sources, and they have many overlapping functions. Therefore, it is much more efficient just to use the same solutions. This reduces not only data duplications, but also reduce costs and future-proofing against emerging financial crime. Next one, Nathan. Our vision is to deliver an end-to-end financial crime prevention platform, from customer onboarding with PEPs, sanction screening, and application project, through all the way through transaction monitoring for both fraud and AML. Now, Intuition also manages customer risk rating throughout the life cycle and integrate with our strategic partners who provide specialized risk, compliance, and biometric data, such as Green ID, ScanTech, and BioCatcher. Next one, Nathan. And finally, just to bring everything together, point one, at the core of Intuition is a real-time fraud detection across every customer channel. Point two, with our visual intelligence capability, fraud teams can instantly spot patterns such as unusual flow, repeated attempt, or coordinated activity that indicate organized fraud. Point three, Intuition analyzes a wide range of signals such as amount, velocity, geolocations, device, fingerprint, IP, and much more. And then we combine machine learning models with traditional rule-based detections so organizations can get the best of both worlds. And we don't forget about internal fraud. We also detect internal fraud, surfacing risks like staff collusions, unusual access to the customer data, or suspicious interactions with dormant accounts. And later, when the case is identified, our case management module provides investigator with a clear, auditable trail of evidence. Everything is captured from the initial alert to that final decisions, ensuring a full transparency for internal governance and regulatory review. And lastly, of course, GenAI is now a powerful part of our solutions. We use GenAI to assist investigators by drafting new detection rules, summarizing complex cases, providing insights into alert, and even recommending what's the next step of the investigations. This reduces manual workload and speed up the time it takes to reach that final decisions. Next one, Nathan. All right, thank you for everyone for the opportunity to present to you all today. Again, my name is Bambang, and you can see my details there. You can visit our website or contact me if you would like more info. We are happy to run a demo for you, or contact us if you want to know how we can help you more. Thank you. Back to you, Nathan.
Thank you, Bambang. And thank you to all of our presenters from today's session. Hope you enjoyed it. I'm just going to post a poll here on your screen. I'd really appreciate it if you could take 2 seconds and punch in a number. This helps us improve our events. If you'd like to watch any of today's events presentations again, keep an eye on your inbox tomorrow. The recording will be sent to you. And with that, that brings a close to this event. I thank you all for attending our program today. Thank you again to our speakers, without whom this wouldn't happen. And if you would like introductions to any of our RegTech organizations who presented today, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to put you in touch with them. We've got one final event for 2025 coming up on the 11th of December on regulatory compliance. If you're interested, please jump onto our website and register for that one. And keep an eye out for our 2026 calendar of events. We've got a lot of good stuff coming up. Hope to see you there. Thanks again and take care.